Most new gun owners don't realize this, but federal gun laws are full of hidden traps. And the truth is, you don't have to do something crazy or reckless to get in trouble. A small mistake, something that feels harmless, can actually turn you into a felon overnight. That's why this video is so important. I'm going to walk you through 5 specific federal gun laws that beginners break all the time. These aren't rare situations. These are everyday mistakes that can cost you thousands of dollars, years in prison, or even your Second Amendment rights permanently. My goal is simple: to help you understand the law without the legal jargon so you know exactly how to stay safe and legal. If you're serious about protecting your rights as a gun owner, make sure you watch this video all the way through, because missing even one of these laws could mean the difference between being safe and being in serious legal trouble. So let's get started. Here's the reality. Buying a gun is easy compared to actually understanding the rules that come with it. Every year, thousands of otherwise law-abiding people end up facing criminal charges. Not because they were violent, not because they intended to do something wrong, but simply because they didn't know how the law works. The biggest trap is this: ignorance is not a defense. If you're caught violating a federal law, even by mistake, the court doesn't care that you didn't mean to. You can still be arrested, fined, or worse, lose your right to own a firearm for the rest of your life. And this problem is getting bigger. Federal and state rules are constantly changing. A TF regulation shift, new bills are introduced, and what was legal 5 years ago may not be legal today. If you're a new gun owner, that means you're at the highest risk. You might assume, I bought it legally, so I'm safe. Or, if my state allows it, the federal government won't care. Both assumptions are dead wrong. That's why it's critical to know the specific federal laws that trip people up most often. If you understand them, you'll have peace of mind every time you carry, travel, or store your firearm. So now let's go step by step through the 5 laws you absolutely need to know. One of the first mistakes many new gun owners make has to do with buying firearms across state lines. Here's how it works under federal law. You cannot legally walk into a gun store in another state, buy a handgun, and take it home. The law requires that handgun purchases across state lines must go through a licensed dealer in your home state. Long guns, like rifles and shotguns, are treated differently. In some cases, they can be purchased out of state, but only if the sale complies with both states' laws and the federal rules. This trips people up all the time. Why? Because it feels natural to drive to a nearby state where prices are better, or maybe where a certain gun is in stock. But if you buy that handgun directly and cross back over the state line, you've already committed a federal offense. Let me tell you a real example. A young man in Virginia once drove to North Carolina because he found a good deal on a pistol. He thought, I'm legal, I have my ID, I'll just buy it. What he didn't realize is that the sale was illegal under federal law. He was later caught, and not only was the gun confiscated, but he was also charged with a felony. This isn't about whether the gun itself was bad. It's about the transfer process. Federal law cares about the paperwork and the state boundaries. So what's the safe way to do it? If you find a firearm you want in another state, the dealer there must ship it to a federal firearms license FFL holder in your home state. You'll then complete the purchase legally through that FFL dealer. It may feel inconvenient, but that small step keeps you 100% compliant. Here's the key takeaway. Never assume you can just drive across state lines, buy a handgun, and bring it home. That single mistake can brand you a felon for life. One of the strictest federal rules is about who is allowed to own a firearm. It doesn't matter if the gun was bought legally, gifted by a family member, or even inherited. If you're a prohibited person under federal law, just holding that firearm is a crime. So who exactly counts as prohibited? Here are the main categories. Convicted felons. Anyone with a felony conviction can never legally own or even touch a firearm. Domestic violence misdemeanors. A single conviction for domestic violence, even a misdemeanor, makes you permanently prohibited. Drug users. Under federal law, even if your state has legalized marijuana, if you admit to using it, you are considered prohibited. Restraining orders. If you're subject to certain restraining orders, you cannot possess a firearm. Mental health adjudications. People declared mentally unfit by a court can't legally own guns. Now, here's where beginners often get caught. They think state law protects them. For example, someone in a marijuana legal state assumes they're safe. But under federal law, admitting to marijuana use can disqualify you from gun ownership. Or maybe a person had a misdemeanor years ago and thinks, that's behind me. But if it was a domestic violence case, federal law says they're permanently banned. There was a case where a man in Colorado had a valid medical marijuana card. He legally used it under state law and still went to buy a firearm. On the background check form, Form 4473, it asks, are you an unlawful user of marijuana or any controlled substance? He answered no. But the ATF considered his state legal marijuana use as a federal violation. Result, he was prosecuted for lying on the form. A felony. This is why beginners must be extra cautious. Even if your local culture or state says something is okay, federal law overrides everything when it comes to firearms. Key takeaway: if you fall into any of the prohibited categories, possession of a firearm is a serious federal crime. Don't assume your state's rules protect you from federal prosecution. One of the easiest ways for a new gun owner to break the law is during transportation. You might think, I'm just driving from one place to another, what could go wrong? But the way you store or carry that firearm in your vehicle can mean the difference between staying legal and being charged with a federal crime. Here's the federal standard. Firearms must be unloaded during transport. The gun should be placed in a locked container, not your glove box or console, but a separate locked case or compartment. Ammunition must be stored separately from the firearm. If you're crossing state lines, this becomes even more important. Federal law, under the Firearm Owners Protection Act, or FOPA, allows you to transport a firearm across states as long as it's legal in both your starting point and destination, but only if you follow the proper storage rules. Here are some common mistakes. Many beginners keep a loaded handgun in their glove box when they travel. In some states, that's fine, but if you cross into another state with stricter rules, suddenly you're violating federal law. And if you get pulled over, that small mistake can quickly escalate into a serious charge. A man legally owned a handgun in Pennsylvania. He kept it loaded under his car seat while driving to New Jersey for work. When he got stopped for a minor traffic violation, police discovered the gun. Even though he had no criminal record, he was arrested for illegal transport because New Jersey's rules were stricter and his storage didn't meet federal safe transport requirements. This shows how fragile the situation can be. One short drive across a border can flip your status from law-abiding citizen to accused criminal. Safe practice: always unload before traveling. Lock your firearm in a hard case. Store ammo separately. Know the rules of both your starting and ending states. Key takeaway: don't assume your car is a safe zone. Transportation rules are one of the most common ways new gun owners get trapped by the law. One of the quickest ways to land in trouble with federal law is by making the wrong modifications to your firearm. Many beginners assume, if I bought the part online or at a gun show, it must be legal. But the reality is that certain changes, even small ones, can instantly reclassify your firearm into a restricted category. And without the proper paperwork or tax stamps, you're committing a felony. Examples of problematic modifications: converting a semi-auto to full auto. Any attempt to make a semi-automatic fire automatically, even with a device like a drop-in auto-sear, is illegal without proper licensing. Even owning the parts that could be used for conversion may be treated as constructive possession. Short-barreled rifles, SBRs. If you attach a stock to a pistol with a short barrel, it may become classified as an SBR under the National Firearms Act, NFA. Without filing paperwork and paying the ATF tax stamp, that modification makes the gun illegal. Suppressors/silencers. Owning or attaching a suppressor without ATF approval and a tax stamp is a federal crime. Even if your state allows suppressors, federal paperwork is still required. Certain attachments. Some attachments, like bump stocks, recently banned federally, have led people into trouble simply because they didn't keep up with new rules. A man bought an AR-style pistol and added a stabilizing brace. For years, this was considered legal, but ATF rulings have shifted, and suddenly that same setup could be reclassified as a short-barreled rifle. Many owners were caught off guard, not realizing their legal gun had overnight become an NFA item. The lesson: the law doesn't care that you didn't mean to build an illegal firearm. If your gun falls into a restricted category and you don't have the paperwork, the penalties are severe. Safe practice: before adding any major modification, check ATF's current stance. If it involves barrel length, stocks, or sound suppression, assume it might need a tax stamp. Don't just rely on what a friend or forum says. Double-check official sources. Key takeaway: gun modifications aren't just about customization. They can change the entire legal category of your firearm. If you don't know the rules, you might be turning your hobby into a federal crime. One of the most common federal violations for beginners is what's called a straw purchase. Here's what it means. If you buy a gun using your name and your paperwork, but the gun is actually intended for someone else, that is a straw purchase. Under federal law, this is a serious crime. Why people do it and why it's wrong. Maybe your uncle or brother says, "Hey, I'll give you the cash, just buy it for me." Or a friend who doesn't want to deal with background checks asks you to pick one up. Some beginners think, well, I passed the background check, so what's the problem? But here's the issue. When you fill out Form 447 473 during a purchase, it specifically asks, are you the actual transferee/buyer of the firearm? If you check yes, but the gun is actually for someone else, that's lying on a federal form, a felony. There was a case where a man bought a pistol for his cousin who had no criminal record. He thought it was harmless, just saving his cousin the paperwork. But when that gun was later recovered in a separate case, the ATF traced it back to him. He was charged with making a straw purchase and faced federal prison time. It didn't matter that the cousin wasn't prohibited. It only mattered that the buyer misrepresented who the gun was for. Key points to remember: if you're buying a gun as a gift, that can be legal, but you must be the actual purchaser, paying with your own money with no agreement to transfer it. If someone hands you cash and tells you to buy for them, that's a straw purchase. Penalty: up to 10 years in federal prison and massive fines. Safe practice: only buy firearms for yourself. If you want to give a gift, make sure it's a true gift and double-check the rules. Key takeaway: even if both people are law-abiding, straw purchases are treated as lies on federal paperwork. For the ATF, that's enough to charge you with a felony. When it comes to federal gun laws, beginners often fall for dangerous myths. These myths create a false sense of security, and that's exactly how people end up in legal trouble. Let's clear up some of the biggest ones. Myth 1: I have a CCW permit, so I'm covered everywhere. This is one of the most common mistakes. A concealed carry permit is state-issued. It may give you legal carry rights in your state, and sometimes in other states with reciprocity agreements, but it does not override federal law. Example: even with a CCW permit, you cannot legally carry in a federal courthouse, post office, or across state lines if the rules there are stricter. Myth 2: if it's legal in my state, federal law doesn't matter. This is flat out wrong. Federal law always has the final say. Your state may allow certain modifications or marijuana use, but under federal law, those same things can make you a prohibited person or put your firearm in a restricted category. Myth 3: nobody enforces these rules unless you're a criminal. Another dangerous assumption. Many beginners think, I'm a good citizen, so I'll never be checked. But violations often show up during traffic stops, routine checks, or even when a firearm is traced after being sold or stolen. Enforcement doesn't care if you had good intentions. Myth 4: if I didn't know, I can't be prosecuted. Ignorance of the law is never a defense. Saying I didn't know this was illegal won't help in court. The responsibility is always on the gun owner to understand the rules. Myth 5: online advice is good enough. Forums, friends, and YouTube comments are filled with bad advice. Just because someone else got away with it doesn't mean you will. Laws shift, ATF rulings change, and what was true last year may not be true today. Key takeaway: the biggest mistake is assuming your personal logic or your state's rules protect you. They don't. Federal law is clear, and once you violate it, the penalties are severe. So here's the bottom line. Federal gun laws are not something you can afford to take lightly. We just went through 5 rules that beginners break all the time: buying across state lines, possession by prohibited persons, transporting firearms the wrong way, making unapproved modifications, and straw purchases. Each one of these has the power to turn an ordinary, law-abiding citizen into a felon overnight. And once that happens, you don't just face fines or jail time. You could lose your Second Amendment rights for life. The good news? Now you know the traps. Staying compliant is not complicated once you're aware of the rules. Take the safe route, double-check before you act, and never rely on myths or casual advice. If this video helped you, do 2 things. Comment your state below. I'm building a state-by-state guide to help gun owners just like you, and your comment will help me know which state to cover next. Check out the playlist linked right here. Gun law mistakes every owner makes. If you found today's video useful, that playlist will give you even more clarity and peace of mind. And finally, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. Because whether it's new ATF rules, state changes, or common beginner mistakes, I'll break it down here in plain English so you stay informed, safe, and legal. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.